Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1261. Frenzy. At such a time, Gu Han was dead, and the 14th young master had also suddenly gone crazy, insisting on remaining at the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Wouldn't that mean that only I am left to fight Zhang Kuang? With the three of us joining hands, we couldn't even kill that perverse fellow. By myself, what can I do? Proceeding further, the army could already see the nearest villages. But for some reason, they suddenly stopped. Then, someone from the front rushed down on a horse, seemingly extremely urgently. They'd either discovered something or met with something unexpected. Jun Moxie and Mei Xuan exchanged a glance, somewhat confused. After not having making contact with the outside world for a long time, discovering the dwelling place of other people was undoubtedly a happy thing. But it wasn't anything to be surprised by. For the entire army to stop like this, there must be a big incident in front. But what could possibly halt an army comprised of over 100,000 venerable level experts of Tian Fa warriors and the evil Monarch Manor's troops? It couldn't be a robbery attempt by some bandits, right? If there was really someone blocking the road to rob them, it would be too funny. Perhaps the world had gone crazy these few days. Which blind person was so brave as to block the strongest army in the current world? Even the 14th young master could not block this army with just his own strength. Perhaps if the 1st young master came back to the Xian continent, he would be able to do that. In a short time, the rider had already arrived before them. Manor Lord, there's a strange situation with the village in front. The entire village of over 100 commoners are confirmed to be all dead. Their deaths are all exactly in the same fashion. All of them had been turned into dry corpses. The rider's forehead was slick with sweat. Clearly, the incident at the front caused him to feel a great amount of fear. Dried corpses? Jun Moxie furrowed his brows. The first thought that came into his mind was none other than Zhang Kuang. The Zhang Kuang who'd lost his physical body was far beneath 14th young master in strength. Compared to Gu Han, he was even lacking a bit. But that strange regenerative ability and the power to siphon life from living creatures was extremely horrifying. If it was really... With that thought, Jun Moxie's shoulders shook and he rose into the sky. Hearing that something was off, Mei Xuan also followed closely behind him. Like a pair of shooting stars, they flew towards the little village. But with a single look, the both of them instantly exploded with rage. There were only a mere 20, 30 small families in this village. But right now, there wasn't a single living aura in here anymore. Bodies were splayed all over in their respective courtyards, or on the streets of the village. Landing on the ground, Jun Moxie flipped one of the corpses over. As he did so, his pupils shrunk. This body was completely dried out, as though there wasn't a single drop of liquid in it. Based on what Jun Moxie had learnt before in his previous life on Earth, a human's body consisted of over 70% water. But this corpse before him had shrunk to a mere 1/3 of its original size, looking like a mummy. This was a completely dried out corpse. When he checked the other corpses, it was the same situation. Whether it was the elderly, the children, or the young, everyone had died in the same way. Although their facial muscles had already dried out, their faces could be observed as being very peaceful. It was as if they hadn't seen anything and had just fallen asleep. What cruelty! Even the little children were not spared. Mei Xuan looked at the corpse of a little girl in front of her and said with gritted teeth, From the decomposition rate of the body and the marks on the body, this should have happened about half a month ago, or longer. Due to the lack of moisture in the bodies, there are already signs of corrosion by the winds. But fortunately, because the water had been completely drained out, their bodies were able to be preserved until we came. Jun Moxie stood straight and said with a heavy expression, "There's no question about it. It must be him. Only Zhang Kuang is capable of such a thing. And only he is as crazy as this." These people's blood and life essence had been completely sucked dry, and there didn't seem to be any other wounds from the outside. Thinking back to how the 14th young master had described Zhang Kuang feeding on wild beasts' corpses before, Jun Moxie did not even need to consider before arriving at his conclusion. Zhang Kuang? Him? How could it, isn't he? Mei Xuan widened her eyes, unable to believe this. It's that same Zhan Luanhui whom we've pushed into the volcano before. Jun Moxie sucked in a deep breath and sighed with a troubled look. He was already difficult to deal with because of his indestructible body. Now, he'd even feasted on so much blood and flesh. There's no doubt that it'll be even more difficult to deal with him. We have to deal with him even if it's difficult to deal with him. No matter what price must be paid, this kind of evil demon cannot be allowed to live in this world and harm people. Mei Xuan gritted her teeth hatefully. We must destroy that fellow thoroughly and return peace to this land. That is natural. Jun Moxie smiled and waved his hands, instructing a few men to bury the bodies. The Grand Army proceeded in a solemn mood. Along the way, numerous reports continuously flowed in. Along the way, they passed through more than 50 villages, but every single one of them was like a death camp. Whether it was man or beast, everybody had been turned into pieces of dried corpses. Counting so far, the number of corpses they'd collected had already reached over 7,000. And this was just the number of humans. If the animals were counted in, it would be close to 20,000. The fire in Jun Moxie's eyes also grew more and more dangerous. Zhang Kuang, to actually go on a frenzy like this. Have you lost your mind? If you only feed on Xian cultivators, then although it is still cruel, it's still considered understandable. After all, their existence is a threat to you. But now, you are killing commoners who are completely innocent and helpless to fight back. There was clearly only one reason for Zhang Kuang's actions. That was, he was trying to absorb large amounts of life force to restore and improve his body. Such vile acts cannot be condoned. Zhang Kuang, even death is not enough to absolve your crimes. The Grand Army gradually drew near to Tiannan City. This place was considered to be quite packed normally, but now, it had become the site of another large-scale massacre. Over 5,000 commoners had been killed in terrible ways. Jun Moxie and the others had been growing more and more furious as they walked. When they reached this place, the accumulated anger had already reached a point of explosion. Fortunately, when they moved further forward, there were no more of these tragic scenes. Jun Moxie had been spreading his spiritual sense out all the way while they traveled. At night, he'd even moved tens of thousands of li in all directions, searching for Zhang Kuang's tracks. However, nothing could be found at all. Such a situation caused him to grow increasingly frustrated. The earlier they could kill that monster, the more helpful it would be to the common people. Any delays would result in a tragedy no less than the outsiders. Only a few dozen days had passed since that huge battle with Zhang Kuang. But over 30,000 people had already fallen into harm. This kind of cruelty and horrifying slaughtering was completely unprecedented. After nearly a month-long journey, the main army finally returned to the Tiannan camp. Dugu Xiaoyi, Guan Qinghan, and the rest had waited until their eyes were red. Finally seeing Jun Moxie and the others return, they ran out excitedly to receive them. But when they saw the unprecedentedly ugly look on Jun Moxie's face, they could not help but to find it be startled. The outsiders had been completely wiped out, and the 3 holy lands were destroyed in the war. What else was there that could cause their husband to feel so troubled? When they heard Mei Xueyan talk about the dried corpses all along the road to here, everyone gasped and widened their eyes. Although these girls' cultivations were considered rather high, their battle strength was very weak. When they heard about those terrifying events, they could not help but to grow afraid. The incredibly frustrated Jun Moxie directly began to give out commands, sending avian Xian beasts to cover the skies and report back the moment they receive any news. All the countries were also informed about the matter of Zhan Kuang. From here on, the only thing left to do was to wait patiently for news. At the same time, he seized the time to cultivate as much as possible. Because Jun Moxie could feel that to deal with Zhan Kuang this time, it would definitely take an extremely bitter fight. If he didn't make ample preparations, he would end up being the one to suffer. After hearing about this matter, Miao Xiaomiao became extremely troubled. She was afraid that Zhan Kuang would run into the Misty Illusory Manor and create chaos. From what Jun Moxie had described, Zhan Kuang's current strength was something that no one in the entire Misty Illusory Manor could handle. Although Jun Moxie also had the same worries in his heart, he still tried to comfort Miao Xiaomiao. No matter how twisted and evil Zhan Kuang was, he would definitely try to think on behalf of his descendants and family. As such, fighting all out against the Misty Illusory Manor would not be his most ideal choice of action. Miao Xiaomiao relaxed a little more after hearing this, but she was still somewhat worried. Although young Master Jun sounded sure when he comforted Miao Xiaomiao, his own emotions had grown even heavier. He'd even determined in his heart that the reason the Misty Illusory Manor hadn't sent anyone to take part in the war for seizing the heavens was related to Zhan Kuang. The silence that the Misty Illusory Manor was maintaining now definitely pointed to the fact that something major had happened there. Otherwise, whether it was for their friendship with the 3 holy lands, or for the sake of their relationship with the Alliance, the Misty Illusory Manor would definitely have taken part in the war. However, Jun Moxie always had a burning doubt in his mind. The others may not be aware of this, but he knew. Although the Misty Illusory Manor didn't have anyone that could handle Zhan Kuang, the Miao family still had a super expert with them, the only remaining personal disciple of the 9 Nether First Young Master, and Zhan Kuang's teacher, Miao Qingcheng. Miao Qingcheng was definitely a super expert that was countless times more powerful than Zhan Kuang, and was the only true sage expert in the current world. Even if he was restricted by all kinds of reasons, there shouldn't be any way that he would be able to condone Zhan Kuang's actions, right? But if that was true, how would the inactivity of the Misty Illusory Manor be explained? The days passed slowly, but there was no news at all. On this day, Xiao Ying, who had yet to walk out from her grief, suddenly came to look for Jun Moxie. Ever since they returned from the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, Xiao Ying had been mired in silence and solitude. She hardly spoke a single word for days. As a daughter of the pugilistic world, although she was not going to the extremes of washing her face with tears every day, her gloomy silence still caused others to feel an extremely heavy feeling when they looked at her. "You're looking for me? What's going on?" Jun Moxie had been staying for long periods of time inside the Hongjun Pagoda, quietly cultivating in preparation to charge for the 8th level of the Hongjun Pagoda. When he heard that Xiao Ying had come to look for him, he immediately ended his training and came out. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1262. I'm embarrassed to say. Gu Han. Jun Moxie's voice sounded somewhat stagnated, and he only reacted half a second later. Miss Chiao, why did you ask this all of a sudden? I hope that I can hear the truth from Lord Jun because I know that there must be something behind this. Qiao Ying's voice was low and heavy, but it was clear. When you went to the Holy Lands camp back then, your original intention was undoubtedly to recruit me to help with the battle. You should have wanted to make use of my all-seeing eye ability, and when the enemy's supremacy enduring heavens appeared, I would be of help to you. Isn't that so? Jun Moxie nodded helplessly. That is correct. But after that, for the entire battle, I didn't make a single move at all. It wasn't that there weren't any opportunities to make a move. Instead, it was Sister Shui Yan who'd been stopping me intentionally. She didn't let me go up to the front lines, and my all-seeing eye was completely useless in this battle. I, the secret weapon of the Holy Lands, had been unable to do anything at all. Qiao Ying continued with narrowed eyes. My guess is that you'd changed your mind. Therefore, you asked Venerable Mei to stop me from going to the front lines to deal with the enemy. The reason you'd left me at the back was to protect me and ensure my safety. Right? That is also correct. Jun Moxie nodded honestly. But why did you change your mind? I simply cannot think of anyone, or anything that could change your mind. Qiao Ying looked at Jun Moxie and continued. The only explanation I could come up with was that my master. Back then, when my master Gu Han sought you for a private word, he must have said something to you, something that was acknowledged by you, causing you to change your mind. Jun Moxie was momentarily stumped. To think that Qiao Ying would actually have managed to think this far. However, this question was really not easy to answer. From the looks of things, it would be wrong no matter what he answered. Qiao Ying took out the jade pendant and sat it gently on her palm. Stroking it lightly, she shook her head. So, I wish to know, what did my master say to you? I trust that master must have made some preparations for my future. I want to know what arrangements he'd made for me. I know that I shouldn't ask Manor Lord so boldly like this, and I know that it might make things difficult for you. But I really want to know. Master is more than a teacher to me. He's a person that's as close as a father to me. Manor Lord, I beg you, please tell me. Cough, cough, cough. Miss Chiao, are you thirsty? Do you want a cup of water? Men, bring some tea and water over here. Jun Moxie coughed awkwardly, unable to reply for the moment. In his heart, he was cursing Gu Han furiously. Feck, you old bastard. You left behind such a lousy situation. How am I supposed to clear it up? You could at least have told me the truth about your relationship with Qiao Ying. Isn't this great now? What should I tell her? A person that's as close as a father? Feck. That old curmudgeon is your father. But judging by how fragile Qiao Ying looked now, if he really told her the truth that Gu Han was really her father, she might just collapse on the spot. But if he didn't tell her, was she expected to really not recognize her ancestral line for the rest of her life, and continue to pass her days in such a clueless manner? If Manor Lord finds it difficult to broach the subject, please don't worry. I can take the news. Qiao Ying gripped the jade pendant tightly and brought it to her chest as she looked at Jun Moxie and said with determination. Jun Moxie looked at Qiao Ying's frail frame, and he could not help but to shake his head in his heart. Can you really take the news? If you can handle it, that would naturally be great. However, the answer to your question is definitely something that you cannot handle. A person who'd always thought that she was an orphan, who was adopted and raised like an orphan. Over 1,000 years had already passed like that. If someone was to tell her now that she wasn't actually an orphan, and that she was someone who had a father and mother as well. Especially her father. He'd groomed her and taken care of her, taking on the role of a master who was as close as a real father. God knew what kind of blow this kind of news would be to her. Even worse. That father and master had already died gloriously in the war for seizing the heavens. From not having to having, and from having back to not having again. Not to mention her. Jun Moxie felt that even if it was him experiencing such a thing, he would probably go mad on the spot as well. Even if the heavens were known to make fun of people, this was simply making fun of people to an extent too extreme. But with Xiaoying staring at him so doggedly now, waiting for him to answer her, what should he say? Manor Lord Jun, please tell me honestly. Xiaoying said in a soft voice. As a disciple, I have a responsibility to fulfill the final wish of my master. Otherwise, how would I have the face to remain living? Xiaoying turned around and continued in a solemn tone. So many uncles and elder brothers whom we'd interacted with for years have already departed eternally in that battle. If not for the fact that this matter had been weighing in my heart, I would have probably already chosen to leave with them. Jun Moxie, do you know that the 3 Holy Lands had nearly 100,000 experts before this? But in just a blink of an eye, all of them are gone. Can you understand such a feeling? Before Jun Moxie could say anything, she began to laugh in a bitter way. Even for orphans who'd lost their family, they would at least still have their relatives. An adoptive family, neighbors. No matter what, there should at least be some close friends or relatives. Seniors, elders, bosom friends. But for me, I'd lost everything in a single day. Everything. What does it mean to have nothing? I, Xiaoying, right now, truly and absolutely, have nothing. Jun Moxie's shoulders shuddered. Although Xiaoying's words were extremely bleak, it was the truth. Right now, the person who was probably the most alone and deprived of kinship was Xiaoying. There was hardly anyone else who could be more alone and helpless as Xiaoying right now. If Manor Lord still refuses to tell me about my master's final will. Xiaoying's eyes filled with tears as she looked at him, there will really be no more meaning in staying alive. Cough cough. It's not that I don't want to say. It's just that I'm not sure where to start. That topic is really. Jun Moxie cleared his throat uncomfortably as a decision appeared in his heart. Sigh. If I have to be shameless, I'll just be shameless this time. Perhaps after several years or decades, when Xiaoying's heart had settled down somewhat, he would tell her the truth. Right now, he could only let time wash away the pain in her heart, to a point where she could accept the reality. Xiaoying balled her hands tightly into fists, until her knuckles turned white. She tried her best to control her emotions and quell the anxiety in her heart. However, her voice still trembled as she nodded. Thank you, Manor Lord Jun. Please tell me now. I promise that I will accept whatever grievous news it is. Grievous news? No, it's not any grievous news. Actually, it's like this. Jun Moxie squeezed out an exceedingly embarrassed expression on his face, and he loosened his collar nervously. How should I put this? Cough cough. Cough cough cough. On the eve of the final battle, Senior Gu Han had already set his heart on sacrificing himself to guard the honor of the Holy Lands. However, the only thing that he couldn't put down was you. Hence, he called me over to one side, cough cough cough. What did he say? Xiaoying asked anxiously. Back then, Senior Gu told me. Manor Lord Jun. This old man has something that I cannot stop worrying about. So I asked him. What is it? Jun Moxie shifted his eyes guiltily and continued. Senior Gu Han shook his head and said. That last Xiao Ying is too simple and innocent. Even though she has a high cultivation, there are completely no schemes in her heart. And she doesn't know how to protect herself from scheming people. This old man cannot set my heart at ease about her. And she is the only thing that is still giving me pause. And so today, I wish to officially hand that lass over to you, brat. Xiao Ying widened her eyes with shock. At that time, I told old Gu to set his mind at ease. That I, Jun Moxie, would definitely take care of Miss Xiao and make sure that you won't have to worry about anything for the rest of your life. Jun Moyo wiped away the sweat on her forehead and continued. But who would have thought that Senior Gu Han would shake his head and tell me? This kind of guarantee has no meaning at all. Brat, if you can promise this old man to take her as your wife after the war, I will really be able to set my mind at ease completely. There aren't a lot of positive things about you, but this old man knows that you truly treat your wives very well. What did extreme shamelessness look like? This was it. Such a level of shamelessness was truly mind-numbing. Xiao Ying gasped aloud again. No matter how many different scenarios she'd imagined before, she'd never expected that the last wish of her master would actually be this. Her face turned completely red in an instant, and she was practically looking for a hole to bury herself in and never come out again. She hadn't thought when she'd come with such a heavy heart to question Jun Moxie, that she would receive such a shocking and embarrassing answer from that fellow. If her master had truly said those things, then it was fully within reason that Jun Moxie had delayed speaking about this matter. Such embarrassing words. With how urgently she'd come to ask him about it. It was as if she couldn't wait to marry herself to him. What kind of situation was this? At this time, that particular shameless fellow had also not expected that the effect of his words would be so good. The situation was so tense just now, but the moment this sentence came out, all the depressing air had been washed away instantly, transformed into coyness and awkwardness. Jun Moxie sighed in his heart when he saw this. I'm indeed not speaking nonsense. Your dad truly left you to me before he died. It's such a pity that there's no such thing as a voice recorder in this world. Otherwise, if I presented the recording in a court of law, you would land in my hands. You're spouting nonsense. Xiao Ying was embarrassed for a long time before she snapped with anger. How can that be nonsense? I didn't want to say it initially. It was you who forced me to tell you. Jun Moxie raised his hands innocently. This is the cold hard truth. Back then, your master was filled with guilt when he talked about you. For the sake of the war for seizing the heavens, the Holy Lands sealed your youth away for 1,200 years. Senior Gu was truly racked with guilt about this matter. So at the final moment, he expelled you from the Holy Lands and gave you to me. Young Master Jun's face had obviously been thickened to a considerable level. He sounded extremely righteous and indignant when talking about her marriage. It was as if he was saying, you forced me into this. So why are you turning around to accuse me instead? Didn't you say that you could accept the answer no matter what it is? Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1263. Go through fire and hell. Then the war was finally over. All this time I had found it difficult to bring this matter up. Cough cough. Jun Moxie acted as if he was embarrassed. My skin is ultimately still too thin. If you hadn't forced it out of me today, I really don't know when I would be able to bring this up with you. I'm a person who is easily embarrassed. That's how I am. Xiaoying only felt as if her heart was in a whirl. A plethora of emotions emerged within her. She found it amusing, but also disappointed, angry but also sad. All these conflicting feelings were truly indescribable. Nevertheless, she couldn't help but steal a glance at Jun Moxie. The thickness of this fellow's skin could easily surpass the thickness of the pillar of heaven's mountain. And he still dared to pretend as if he was embarrassed and say things like, "My skin is ultimately still too thin." That's the biggest lie in the world. Is there anyone else in this world who is more thick-skinned than you? I wouldn't believe it even if you killed me. Since it's difficult to bring it up, then just keep it to yourself. May Manor Lord Jun pretend that nothing happened today. Xiaoying will find her own way, but she wouldn't need to worry Manor Lord Jun and make things difficult for you. Xiaoying said angrily, gritting her teeth as she flew away in a wind that was tinged with a light fragrance. As she left, Great Beauty Qiao's face was flushed, out of either embarrassment or anger. She muttered under her breath. He's still the same lecher from back then. But the infuriating thing was, that scoundrel had the cheek to pretend as if he were willing. As if he was the one who had suffered a great disadvantage. After this ridiculous nonsense, that suffocating depressing feeling in Xiaoying's heart also unconsciously lightened quite a bit. Hey, Miss Xiao. You can't pretend that this matter didn't happen. As the saying goes, one must fulfill what they have been entrusted to do. Your master, old Gu, entrusted this matter to me before he passed. I absolutely must fulfill this. Even if I have to go through fire and water. You can't just turn me into someone without morals. I mean. Actually. From behind, Jun Moxie's anxious voice could be heard. It was obvious that young Master Jun was quite stubborn on this matter. Miss Qiao. Little Ing. Don't be in a hurry to go. Let's discuss how we can fulfill old Senior Gu's last wish. In what way? What methods? Or what positions? A certain person seemed really sincere and genuine in the first half of his speech, making him seem like someone with great morals and principles, but it's a pity that the later part of his words revealed his true colors. Some things that should be said, other things that shouldn't be said, and things that can be said and cannot be said were all spewed out of his mouth. Discuss your head. You despicable, shameless lecher. Who cares about what methods and what positions? Xiaoying's flustered and embarrassed voice could be heard from afar, before it gradually faded away. Obviously, Miss Qiao had already fled far away. She grumbled angrily as she fled, as if this frustration could only be quelled with her biting him to death. Fulfilling my master's last wishes is having to go through fire and water? You shameless person. Jun Moxie plopped back into his seat. Heavens! I finally managed to pass it off. That was close. Then, his thoughts began to wander as he indulged in his fantasies. Xiaoying's last sentence was, who cares about what method or positions? This sentence has deeper implications, huh? Is she saying that it's also okay to use force as a method? And is any position fine? As he daydreamed, young Master Jun's eyes formed into crescents as a wolf-like grin appeared on his face. Actually, Miss Xiaoying was speaking out of spite and didn't know what she was saying. But young Master Jun interpreted her words as such, and his endless fantasies began to fill up his entire head. Over the following days, the continent remained peaceful. It seemed as if Shan Kuang's trace had completely vanished. And the dried-up corpses no longer occurred. Misty Illusory Manor continued to remain silent, and there was no news from them. The unexpected collapse of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains brought about the sudden crisis of an invasion by the outsiders. But it came just as quickly as it had left. In merely 2 months, this bothersome headache that had kept the peak experts of the Xian continent bothered was completely eradicated. Though the Xian continent had also paid a hefty price for it. There was a large decrease in Xian cultivators. All the Xian cultivators were resting up, and hardly seen around anymore. While those who were not Xian cultivators, the common folks, were completely uninvolved in this crisis. They weren't greatly affected. As the dust settled, everything seemed to have reverted back to normal. Yet it was even harder to catch a glimpse of the evil monarch, young Master Jun, during this period of time. It was still possible to catch sight of him at night. Young Master Jun would seek the company of Guan Qinghan, Dugu Xiaoyi, or Miao Xiaomiao at night, sometimes individually, and sometimes, all of them together. And often tease and flirt with the ladies during mealtimes. But young Master Jun completely vanished in the day. He had been focused on his cultivation while staying inside the Hongjun Pagoda, spending almost 16 hours a day on practicing. He wasn't the only one. Mei Xueyan was the same, accompanying Jun Moxie in the Hongjun Pagoda every day to raise her own cultivation. The two of them were the strongest in the entire Tianfa, or even the entire Xian continent currently. If Zhang Kuang reappeared again, they would definitely have to be the main forces involved in the battle. They could not afford to relax. Both of them may already be extremely powerful, but even with Jun Moxie being a half-sage, there was still a considerable disparity between them and Zhang Kuang, this seasoned ultimate expert. Especially when Zhang Kuang was now a strange being that could not be killed. So this unique trait had undoubtedly increased the difficulty of this battle. Aside from working doubly hard in cultivating, Jun Moxie put a huge amount of effort in refining pills. There was an endless supply of treasured ingredients piling up in the Hongjun Pagoda, all at his disposal. Young Master Jun was also getting more skilled with his pill refining with all the practice. On the other hand, Mei Xueyan was completely devoted in her cultivation of the art of unlocking heaven's fortune, raising her own skills. Jun Moxie's individual cultivation was in sync with the art of unlocking heaven's fortune. Even his mental fortitude could be gradually improved. When his mind, spirit and soul, skills and Hongjun Pagoda all attained the same level, they would all merge into one. And when these few aspects had completely merged together, it meant that Jun Moxie was on the verge of breaking through again, to reach the 8th level of the art of unlocking heaven's fortune any moment. This was the unique trait that only Jun Moxie had, that others could only be envious of. The power of the 5 elements, power of wind and cloud and power of lightning in young Master Jun's body also naturally attained a perfect equilibrium. And the only thing lacking now was the power of yin and yang. Jun Moxie was in a sophisticated state of imbalance between yin and yang. If he managed to bring the yin and yang into a state of complete equilibrium, it would immediately unlock the 8th level of the Hongjun Pagoda and officially bring him into the 8th level of the art of unlocking heaven's fortune. But Jun Moxie could vaguely sense that this was something that mustn't be rushed into. If his own skills were inadequate and he tried to advance by force, it would be an ugly scenario. It'd really be a disaster if he accidentally ended up being stripped of everything. Thus Jun Moxie did all that he could to refine his own strength, mind, and all the powers that belonged to him, be it Xian skills or other divine skills. He did all that he could to condense, combine, and master every one of them, ultimately merging them all into one. Yet every time, at the final moment before it all merged, there would be a minor slip-up and his success would be thwarted. While young Master Jun continued to struggle arduously, Mei Xueyan wholeheartedly worked on assailing the art of unlocking heaven's fortune. Her situation was completely different from that of Jun Moxie. Her own mental fortitude and skills had already greatly surpassed the realms of her current art of unlocking heaven's fortune. The current skills Mei Xueyan possessed was whatever that was left after returning back to Tianfa from the Great Battle. While Jun Moxie ceaselessly refined pills, Mei Xueyan was naturally the first person to take them. With all these repeated boosts, her own skills had already reached the level of a 4th-level Saint Monarch. But her art of unlocking heaven's fortune was merely of a 3rd-level breakthrough. This was undoubtedly a huge and obvious flaw. Like a huge disparity existing in a person's body at the same time. Thus Mei Xueyan must put greater efforts in the art of unlocking heaven's fortune, raising her own cultivation as quickly as possible. With her powerful skills of a 4th-level Saint Monarch, it would be extremely easy for her to suffer a devil's bite if her mental fortitude was inadequate. And she was not like Jun Moxie, and didn't have the help of the Hongjun Pagoda to control these powers. She would need to attain the 5th level of the art of unlocking heaven's fortune in order to wield these powers properly. As Jun Moxie had the Hongjun Pagoda, it could perfectly make up for whatever he was lacking in. However, this also resulted in a majority of the powers Jun Moxie could absorb to be sapped away. Thus, though Jun Moxie may have already reached the peak of the 7th level of the art of unlocking heaven's fortune, he was unable to wield about 50% of the skills. And this was completely different from Mei Xueyan. In summary, both of them were spending all their time cultivating, hoping to allow themselves to utilize their greatest abilities as quickly as possible. The spiritual qi in the Hongjun Pagoda came surging in like tsunamis, gushing into their bodies in a mad frenzy. Then, it automatically absorbed large amounts of energy from the external world to replenish inside the Hongjun Pagoda. Hongjun Pagoda's actions had resulted in a giant funnel to appear in the skies of Tianfa forest that spanned for 1,000 li, narrowing as it descended. All the spiritual qi of the entire continent came gathering over just like this. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1264. Wish. With such dedicated cultivation, naturally they made great progress. However, Great Beauty Mei was bothered by something else. The arduous and tough practice wasn't a big deal. What Mei Xueyan found unbearable was that, due to the matter with Shan Kuang, Jun Moxie would head out every day to check if there were any updates. But whenever this scoundrel headed out, his lower half got the better of him. And this scoundrel was still harping on the matter with her uncooperation back then. He would harass her before he headed out, making her entire face turn red and flushed before leaving. She had more or less gotten used to it by now and could just leave things as is had he stopped there. But the more unacceptable thing was that every time when he did naughty things with Guan Qinghan or Dugu Xiaoyi, he would purposely leave a small opening in the Hongjun Pagoda, allowing her to hear all those weird noises distinctly. Naturally, a virgin maiden like Mei Xueyan would be extremely embarrassed and awkward about hearing those weird sounds. Yet she had to endure it silently, unable to confront the culprit on this. Mei Xueyan could even imagine the despicable, shameless look of a certain baddie if she were to criticize him for it. Ha! You were the one eavesdropping on this young master's private matters and you are the reasonable one? If that scoundrel really questioned her back with this, she could forget about keeping her face anymore. And if that fellow used it as a chance to push things, how she wished that she could tie him up and give him a good beating. But now, she could no longer win against him. Even if she could, she wouldn't bear to really hit him. Looks like she really needs to find a chance to work together with all the other sisters, otherwise this baddie will really get too brazen. But the first woman to lose her cool wasn't Mei Xuan. It was Miao Xiaomiao. 3 months had already passed. But there was still nothing from the Misty Illusory Manor. Miao Dao and Miao Jian didn't visit, and there was no news from them. Something was off. The Misty Illusory Manor was in an awkward position due to the hostility between Jun Moxie and the Three Holy Lands, and it was difficult for them to intervene, so they didn't assist in the war for seizing the heavens. It may be a poor reason, but it was still passable. But now, the outsiders had been wiped out, and the Three Holy Lands have also fallen. There was no longer any issue about their position. For the Misty Illusory Manor to not make any move when their princess, Miao Xiaomiao of the Miao family, was staying outside for such a long period before being properly wedded. This was a little ridiculous. Or rather to say, it was still unusual. Miao Xiaomiao wasn't the only one who was about to lose her cool. Even Jun Moxie was too. He had always been cautious of the devious ways of Zhang Kuang and did not put his attention on the Misty Illusory Manor. But thinking back, he couldn't help but feel a pang of shock. It couldn't be that something major had really happened in the Misty Illusory Manor, could it? Recalling the sudden disappearance of Zhang Kuang, and the fact that he was the ancestor of the Zhan family of the Misty Illusory Manor, young Master Jun really couldn't remain seated any longer. Thus, he made the decision to go into the Misty Illusory Manor to see what the situation was. If Zhan Kuang was wreaking havoc, perhaps he could borrow Miao Qingqing's strength to thoroughly annihilate him. That would be the most ideal situation. Even if it couldn't be achieved. If the battle unfolded in Misty Illusory Manor, it had nothing to do with the Xian continent. The classic, you can die on your own, way of doing things. It's just that this expedition had set the entire evil Monarch Manor abuzz. Du Xiaoyi, Han Yanmeng, and the rest insisted on accompanying him. Even the more composed Guan Qinghan also seemed keen. While those few younger girls outrightly pinned their vengeful stares on a certain someone. Up till now, only Guan Qinghan, Du Xiaoyi, and Miao Xiaomiao had gotten the taste of assurance. All the others were still left hanging, not having the smallest chance of coming close to it. Now that things have finally settled down, Jun Moxie was heading out again. How could it be accepted? Young Master Jun had a hard time dealing with this female army for a few days, finally pacifying them with countless promises and treats. Jun Moxie had truly experienced the side effects of having several partners. It was truly a huge headache when a bunch of women made noise at the same time. It's not that easy to enjoy having several partners, Finally, he managed to pacify his own women, but there were still many more people who needed to be appeased. Ever since old Master Jun had moved into Tian Fa Forest, his days had undoubtedly been carefree and relaxed. Occasionally playing chess, drinking tea, fishing, practicing. If there was nothing to do, he'd pick up a book to read, finding his own entertainment. He was getting stronger in his health, but if there were any regrets, it was none other that he was going to get another grandson, but there's no hope of a great-grandson yet. Can't that brat Moxie work harder? Not getting any single girl pregnant after such a long time. It's truly an insult to the Jun family. Old Master Jun was definitely not being boastful or arrogant. Old Master Jun himself had 3 sons. His first son, Jun Wuhui, had 3 sons by the age of 30. Third Master Jun Wui may have started later. But even Han Yenyao was pregnant now, so he was ahead of young Master Jun. Thus young Master Jun truly was a disgrace. Jun Wui and Han Yenyao were deeply in love, spending the majority of their efforts in the charity business they had established together. As the saying goes, the man sings and the woman follows. They showed their love to each other practically every day. Furthermore, as her belly grew bigger, the day Han Yenyao gave birth drew nearer. Jun Wui served her with utmost care every day, awaiting the birth of his son. Aside from this, it seemed that the Jun family really hadn't had a new son in a long time. Only young Master Jun's mother, Dongfang Wenxin, was a little silent during this period of time, often remaining in her room alone, silently going into a daze. Sometimes, even Jun Moxie would be rejected when he asked to meet her. Under the nourishment of young Master Jun's divine medicine, Dongfang Wenxin showed no signs of aging and was looking younger by the day. Her appearance was that of a woman in her late 20s. Yet the nourishment from medicine could only nourish the physical body, but not the regrets of the heart. Jun Moxie could distinctly sense the perplexed feelings and longing in his mother's heart. The crisis of the outsiders had been completely eradicated. The Jun family now stood on the peak position of this continent, and it was impossible to be pulled down. Her precious son was publicly recognized as the #1 in the world. Those few daughter-in-laws were all gorgeous, gentle, and extremely filial. The only regret she has now was that she couldn't see her son's wedding, hadn't carried her grandson, and there was still more external concern. Zhang Kuang. But it was only a matter of time for these problems to be resolved. Dongfang Wenxin was really confident in her own son. Thus, right now, Dongfang Wenxin seemed to feel as if there was no meaning to her existence anymore. With this thought, she couldn't help but remember her husband who had died young, and her 2 other sons who had died tragic deaths. This was ultimately a pain in her heart that would remain forever. A pain that could never be relieved. For eternity. Right now, Dongfang Wenxin was sitting silently in her room, staring in a daze at the painting she had drawn of her husband, not moving her gaze away for 1 second. Her eyes were completely filled with miserable reminiscence. Wu Hui. Did you know? Moxie has really grown up already. He has many wives and concubines. The Jun family is no longer in any danger, and we are practically ruling the world. And you had never thought of wanting to rule, only hoping that everyone is healthy and happy. The current Jun family is strong enough to last for generations. You can rest in peace now. There is no longer anything that I'm worried about in this world. Moxie can handle everything, so I can also rest assured. We have been separated by life and death for more than 10 years. Soon. The day you and I shall be reunited is coming soon. Dongfang Wenxin mumbled to herself, as tears slowly filled her eyes. It's coming really soon. You must wait for me. When Moxie gets married and I get a look at our grandson, I'll immediately go and accompany you. I haven't gone over all this time. You must be blaming me. I believe you will definitely also wish to see our son establish his own family, and how our grandson looks. I've been enduring through it all, so that I can bring this good news over. Soon. Very soon. Dongfang Wenxin smiled bleakly. I hope you can forgive me. And you've never blamed anyone and wouldn't blame me. But you must have been anxious from waiting. Just at this moment, a soft knocking sound rang out. Mother, are you inside? Jun Moxie was here. I'm here. Moxie, give me a moment. Dongfang Wenxin wiped her eyes in a panic, keeping that painting away. She checked her reflection in the mirror, ensuring that there's nothing amiss about her, before she went to open the door. Jun Moxie sharply detected an extreme feeling of grief the moment he stepped into the room. He couldn't help but sigh internally. Moxie, Why did you wrap up so early today? Dongfang Wenxin looked at her son, her face completely normal, a faint smile gracing her face. Dongfang Wenxin's mood would only get better when she saw her son every day. And I will need to head out these couple of days to settle some minor affairs. I came over to inform you, so that you wouldn't worry. Oh, you're heading out again? Dongfang Wenxin wrinkled her brow. Is it dangerous? But she realized how foolish she sounded when she asked this. Even if there was danger, why would her son answer her honestly? With Jun Moxie's status, how could it be a small matter if it was something that required him to tend to personally? This son had always reported only the good news and held back unpleasant ones. I already said that it was to resolve something small. How could it be dangerous? For the most part. It's just that I wanted to go out for a bit to clear my mind. As expected, Jun Moxie only explained it very vaguely. Even if it was really dangerous. Will you tell? Dongfang Wenxin rolled her eyes. But you've come at a good time. I was also looking for you to discuss something. What's the matter? Jun Moxie asked. Moxie, you're no longer small. You're a grown boy now. And you have so many good ladies following you. Dongfang Wenxin said slowly. It's not suitable to continue like this. Without giving them proper statuses. It's better to have them settled earlier. Take that Miao lass for example. She has given everything to you. The least you should do is give her a name. And Xueyan, why are you delaying it? And Kur, Manor. Dongfang Wenxin ignored Jun Moxie's jaw that was dropping, bringing up every single girl. Then, in a decisive tone, she said, let's see. When you have the time, let's hold the wedding. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1265. Disillusionment. Hold the wedding? Jun Moxie laughed bitterly. His wedding wasn't a simple affair. And it was not something that entirely concerned himself. The wedding of the evil monarch was the greatest affair of the entire continent. When that time comes, even if he wished to be more low profile, he wouldn't be able to. Mother, let's wait a while longer for this matter. Actually, the matter I am going to settle this time just so happens to involve Xiamiao's family. Jun Moxie said. The Misty Illusory Manor hasn't sent any news for such a long time, so something may have really happened. I'm going out this time to take a look at what exactly happened over there. Jun Moxie explained it verbally, but he could vaguely sense something amiss. Dongfang Wenxin naturally would be anxious about this matter, but she seemed a little impatient to be bringing it up so suddenly today. Everyone was already living together. It can't be that they're going to slip and run away. Wedding or not, wasn't it merely a ceremony? Even old Master Jun isn't anxious about this, merely urging me to get round to doing that. So why is mother this anxious? I'm anxious to carry my grandson. Not only me, even your grandfather is also anxious. Dongfang Wenxin said, seemingly displeased. If you continue to drag things out, I really don't know when I can hug my grandson. Now, all those sisters of mine in the past are already carrying their grandsons. Some of them have grandsons who are looking for wives already. While you have no news at all. Let's not even talk about those distant relatives. Take your third uncle for example. The both of them had. What does this have to do with third uncle? The two of them are so chummy and flaunt their sweetness. I'm not capable of doing that. There's no reason why you need to be so anxious about wanting to carry a grandson. Jun Moxie rolled his eyes. Besides, how can those sisters of yours compare to you? They're all old hags now. Which one of them can compare to you? Who looks like a young maiden right now? Jun Moxie said with a mischievous smile. Mother, if the both of us go on the streets, it'd be a wonder if they don't mistake you as my younger sister. If I said we were mother and son, there would definitely be no one who would believe it. So what? Even if others see me as youthful, what use is there? Mother's heart is already old. Dongfang Wenqin let out a long sigh. One admiring look from your father surpasses everything. Without your father, then, it is meaningless even if I'm the most beautiful woman in the world. A woman looks beautiful for the person who loves her. A woman's beauty only blooms for one person in her entire life. That moment of dazzle marks eternity. Dongfang Wenqin said. Without that person, even the most beautiful, gorgeous women will merely turn into a skeleton sooner or later. That's all. There's no exception. Jun Moxie sighed, at a loss for words. He had done his greatest to avoid mentioning his father, Jun Wuhui, before his mother all this time. To refrain from bringing up his mother's sad memories. But he hadn't imagined that Dongfang Wenqin still could not help but remember it. Or rather to say, she had never been able to move on. For his sake, for everyone's sake, she had merely concealed and hid it away. At the same time, Jun Moxie figured out why Dongfang Wenqin was feeling so down today. And why she was hurrying him to hold his wedding and have children. It must be because she no longer had any lingering attachments to this world. She only wished to accomplish the final wish in her heart, so she could bring good news to his father in the netherworld. Holding hands, turning old together. If he left for the netherworld first, she shall follow after. Dongfang Wenqin felt that she had let Jun Wuhui down greatly by being late to join him for over a decade. Right now, the Jun family was complete, and their son had already grown up. Everything was fulfilled. Jun Moxie suddenly realized. His wedding and him having children was the only lingering wish Dongfang Wenqin had right now. If this wish were fulfilled, then she had no more attachments, and it was the time for her to let go and leave. Mother, the matter about reviving that I spoke to you before. It is no empty talk. Prior to this, I was inadequate and cannot do anything about it. But right now, things are almost ready. Jun Moxie gritted his teeth and finally uttered the sentence. With the mastering of his cultivation, Jun Moxie also understood more about immortality. Which also made him realize how difficult reviving someone was. But if he didn't do this, he could not dissipate his mother's wish to die. So no matter how difficult, Jun Moxie would try his best. There was a chance as long as he was willing to try. If he didn't, the chance remained at 0. But if he did, the chance would no longer be 0. If it were someone who had just passed on not long ago, using the soul summoning techniques, with some heaven-defying divine medication, one could really bring one back to life. It's just that there was a comparable price to be paid for this. No matter which world, souls were under the same management. The netherworlds, the hierarchy of hell, would absolutely forbid the soul of a deceased person to return back into the world easily. Jun Moxie was undoubtedly powerful, but he had yet to reach the level of communicating with yin and yang. This naturally didn't give him the qualifications to make the hierarchies in hell bow down to him. With Jun Moxie's knowledge. And perhaps, only with the level of the 9 nether first young master would he be able to bring a soul out. But there was no meaning in being able to bring the deceased soul out. Because the soul didn't have a body. Which meant that there was no physical body that could contain the soul. So there was nowhere to start talking about reviving. Jun Wuhui had already passed on for over 10 years. not mentioning whether he had already reincarnated. Even if his soul remained, his original body was already long gone. Even if the extreme method of forcefully taking over another person's body was used, the soul himself must be capable of pulling off this act. This was something that could not be accomplished with a fluke or external help. And not all bodies can be forcefully taken over. A person who was still well and alive had his own body as his strongest protection. For his body was the perfect container for his soul. Even the most powerful soul, as long as it was not a cultivator and didn't have any means of forcefully taking over, could do absolutely nothing about it. Even a cultivator would only be able to do it after amassing a certain level of power. No matter how capable Jun Moxie was, he couldn't do anything about it, even if he wished to. Back in the Dongfang residence, when he brought up reviving, firstly, he said it to comfort Dongfang family. Secondly, Jun Moxie had just come into contact with cultivation and was filled with inflated confidence gained from reading fantasy novels in his previous life. Thus, it was extremely easy for him to describe the process of revival. Furthermore, with the art of unlocking heaven's fortune, the #1 skill in the world, he felt that he definitely could do it. But now, thinking back, he realized how impetuous it was of him to have said all that back then. Even if he really had that capability, and those conditions, Jun Wuhui had already been dead for over 10 years. Who knew if his soul was still around? Would he have dispersed with the wind? Or reincarnated? But aside from this, there was no better solution. Only dragging it out in this matter. For as long as he could. Dragging it on endlessly. Even if his mother lived in hope and illusions, it would still be better than her being depressed. A hopeless hope was still a form of hope. If even a hope like this was gone, how would Dongfang Wenqin continue living? Dongfang Wenqin shook her head as she chuckled bitterly from hearing Jun Moxie's words. Moxie, Mother is no longer a child. I understand your efforts. Mother knows that you're doing your best to stall for time. You're hoping that with time, I will stop wishing for death, and forget all of that. But you don't know that a man like your father is one that no one will ever be able to forget and move on from. Jun Moxie's heart jolted, raising his head to look at Dongfang Wenqin. He only left his heart turn cold. When you said that you could revive your father back then, I may have only half believed in it. But right now, I no longer do. Your father has died for over 10 years. And even his body is gone. How would you revive him? How are you going to start? Dongfang Wenqin chuckled. Even back then, when I said I believed you that you would be able to revive your father, you might as well say that. I was believing in your filial piety. In the future, it's better not to bring up anything about reviving. Dongfang Wenqin suddenly laughed bleakly. Back then, how many iron-blooded men in the Jun family followed your father, staining the battlefield with their blood? Your second uncle. And your 2 brothers. Don't tell me you're going to revive every single one of them. She looked at Jun Moxie lovingly, stretching her hands to gently stroke his cheeks as she said softly. In the huge battle this time, Tian Fa suffered extreme losses. No matter whom. Any one of them who died in this battle was a good man. They have someone back home who is crying bitterly, day after death, hoping to die, just like me. Don't tell me you're going to revive all of them. If you can't, if you can only revive your father alone, even if it can really be done. Did you think, with your father's personality, he would be able to continue living? There was a genuine look of pride in Dongfang Wenqin's eyes. Even if he could be revived, Jun Wuhui would definitely not accept the fact that only he could be revived. That lofty, unyielding white general would absolutely not live without a purpose. Jun Moxie stumbled backwards, perspiring furiously. Dongfang Wenxin's words had struck right in Jun Moxie's vitals. How to answer? There was no way to answer. Hearing his mother's determined speech, Jun Moxie was stunned. In fact, although young Master Jun knew the difficulties of this matter a long time ago, he thought of his mother's situation if his father cannot be revived. His mother would definitely have no will to live on. Thus, even though he knew he shouldn't, he still wished to give it a try. With all the miracles the art of unlocking heaven's fortune and Hongjun Pagoda have brought to him, it may not be entirely hopeless. Especially with the emergence of Zhang Kuang using the 9 illusory quicksand to mold a body. Jun Moxie had developed a plausible plan. When he defeated Zhang Kuang, he would try to see if he could get that 9 illusory quicksand and use it as the foundation to sculpt a body for Jun Wuhui exactly the same as his when he was alive. This method was undoubtedly tough, but it was not entirely impossible. But Dongfang Wenxin's words right now completely erased the final hope in his heart. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1268. Unreceptive Misty Illusory Manor. Dongfang Wenxin's words were not wrong. She was the person who understood Jun Wuhui the most. With the unyielding and loyal character of the white general Jun Wuhui, how could he accept that only he lived? With so many brothers that had died for him and so many years that had passed. Yet only you, Jun Wuhui, get to revive just like that? Jun Moxie sighed. Who didn't have a family of old and young to take care of? Moxie, this matter doesn't need to be discussed anymore. Go on. Just see to your own matters. Dongfang Wenxin sat silently, gazing at Jun Moxie's face with a gentle smile. Be extra careful when you're out there. Jun Moxie nodded his head. He completely understood the motherly love from his mother. When you return, let me host your wedding. Dongfang Wenxin beamed, a radiant look of happiness across her face. You mustn't delay it anymore. Mother has been waiting for that day for such a long and torturous time. Jun Moxie felt an indescribable sourness surging in his heart, barely holding back his tears. There's one more matter. It's regarding those people at Tian Guanlin. I sent people over to fetch them back, but they refused to move. I've already sent men to deliver some necessities, and deliver warnings to the various countries to not take any reckless action, no matter what. Is Mother satisfied with this arrangement? Jun Moxie said carefully. Those uncles of yours have deep bonds with your father. They will not leave. They're also just waiting for that day, that's all. Dongfang Wenxin smiled bleakly. Leave them be. What you've done is already good enough, good enough. As he walked out of Dongfang Wenxin's room, Jun Moxie suddenly felt as if the matters of the world was just that intangible and vague. That afternoon, Jun Moxie brought Mei Xuan, Miao Xiaomiao, and Xiaoying out of the evil Monarch Manor. They traveled light and headed straight to the entrance to the Misty Illusory Manor. Miao Xiaomiao was definitely needed to find the entrance into the Misty Illusory Manor, while Mei Xuan was the biggest aid for Jun Moxie. As for Xiaoying, she was brought out so she could clear her mind. After all, Xiaoying was the most pitiful amongst all the women at the evil Monarch Manor. Xiaoying had witnessed the disastrous battle between the two races previously, and definitely suffered some sort of mental trauma from it. Jun Moxie was someone who had transmigrated from the modern world into the past. Thus he had some form of understanding on the ways of psychology. He understood that the pain in Xiaoying's heart needed to be resolved as quickly as possible. If it festered, it'd be too late. Qiao Ying's cultivation was originally at the realm of the Saint Venerable, and after moving to the evil Monarch Manor, Jun Moxie had ceaselessly supplied her with numerous medicines to boost it further. Now, it had already reached the level of a 4th-level Saint Venerable, and was one step away from the realm of a Saint Monarch. Meanwhile, Miao Xiaomiao had already made swift progress during this period of time. She was originally a 3rd-level Venerable, but now, she was already a 3rd-level Saint Emperor. To leap across over 10 levels in such a short period of time, even she felt as if she were dreaming. An advancement speed like this was one that no one could ever dream of. To think that, there's this method of cultivation in this world? Whoosh! And I'm already a Saint Emperor? Unbelievable. Women, ah! It's really most practical to find a good husband. Ah! Of course. If this husband was one that she loved and loved her dearly, it'd be the most perfect. These 4 people and their impressive cultivation allowed them to travel rapidly. They wouldn't be as fast even if they traveled by horse. The 4 of them traveled as fast as the wind. At shocking speed. Some passers-by occasionally caught sight of them. 3 ethereal goddess-like women and a handsome lad coming from afar, but before they could get a good look, they had already gone past them and vanished without a trace. In merely 4 days, they had already arrived at that forest that linked the 2 dimensions. It was the place Chao Guofeng and the other Saint Emperors brought Jun Moxie into. Jun Moxie suddenly felt a wave of déjà vu as he looked at the smooth stone walls. Miao Xiaomiao, aware that she was the professional in the group, walked up to the stone wall, pressing her palms against it. She channeled her energy as a small crystalline ball of light appeared on her hands. That light was gentle and bright, as if it was permeating through the stone walls. As the ball of light grew bigger, a layer of ripple slowly formed in the surrounding air, as if a small pebble was tossed onto the surface of a still lake. The ripples grew bigger and bigger, as it slowly spread out. A faint door seemed to be appearing vaguely. Beads of perspiration began to appear on Miao Xiaomiao's forehead, as a look of shock filled her eyes. It had never been this difficult in the past. Ah! Why is it so difficult this time? It didn't take long for her to activate the door back when she was still a venerable. Now with such great improvement in her cultivation, it should be even easier. But why was it like this? While she was filled with confusion, there was a sudden hong. Miao Xiaomiao groaned as her petite frame was sent flying out from the great impact. Jun Moxie reacted quickly and caught her in his arms and channeled his qi into her immediately, preventing Miao Xiaomiao from sustaining any injuries. That faint door flickered and vanished suddenly. What happened? Mei Xuan and Qiao Ying ran over to join them quickly. They did not know the matter about the door to the Misty Illusory Manor, and had thought that Miao Xiaomiao wasn't skilled enough, or used the wrong technique, which resulted in the door being unable to be opened. Jun Moxie had also encountered this door before. When Chao Guofeng and the rest brought young Master Jun into the Misty Illusory Manor, they went through this same door, and it didn't take much effort either. Miao Xiaomiao's current cultivation had surpassed them greatly. Jun Moxie may not have figured out why this had happened, but he already had a bad feeling about it. A faint trail of blood appeared on the corner of Miao Xiaomiao's lips. But with Jun Moxie's qi channeling into her, though the impact was great, it was not a major issue. Yet her expression was extremely solemn. The door to Misty Illusory Manor cannot be opened anymore. The Misty Illusory Manor cannot be accessed anymore? The trio was stunned. In the past, I was merely a venerable, but I could use this door to sneak out secretly. You only need to know the technique to open this door. It's not difficult. But this time, I'm already a Saint Emperor, but I cannot open it even with all my might. Something must have happened inside the Misty Illusory Manor, Miao Xiaomiao said. The entrance and exits of the Misty Illusory Manor are all the same. My guess is that, if it cannot be opened from the outside, they also won't be able to open it from the inside. A look of worry filled Miao Xiaomiao's face. In other words, no one can enter or exit the Misty Illusory Manor right now. Which means that it is completely separated from the Xian continent. The trio was stunned into silence. They had also realized the reason why there was no news coming from the Misty Illusory Manor for such a long time. So it turned out that for some reason, the Misty Illusory Manor had been completely separated from the Xian continent. Which meant that they could not enter the Xian continent even if they wished to. What should we do now? Miao Xiaomiao looked at Jun Moxie helplessly, a look of panic and anxiety in her eyes. It seemed like only Jun Moxie can solve this problem now. Jun Moxie was also at a loss about what to do. Young Master Jun may be confident of his divine ways, but he didn't have the slightest inkling when it came to such matters. How could he come up with any good ideas? How many portals connect the Misty Illusory Manor to the Xian continent in total? Jun Moxie asked. It seems like there's a total of 6. This is one of them. There's one more on the grasslands to the north of Tianxiang City. The others are located on the edges of the continent. Miao Xiaomiao explained. Because our appearance can be very sudden and scare people, we chose to locate them in less populated areas. Which means, if we wish to try entering from the other portals, we probably will have to go on a tour of the entire continent. Miao Xiaomiao rubbed her sleeves and answered meekly. More or less. That's what it means. Jun Moxie stumbled, almost falling to the ground. Sis, do you know how big the continent is? Mei Xuan and Qiao Ying were also amused. Even if Jun Moxie were to use the yin-yang escape art and travel at maximum speed, it would take him at least 2 months to complete one round around the continent. And this was an estimated timing that could only be achieved by not eating or drinking the entire time. Only moving constantly. Then, lass. The sudden lockdown of this portal, do you think it's man-made or caused by natural reasons? Jun Moxie rubbed his head, feeling his scalp prickle as he obtained this information. It definitely is caused by someone. Miao Xiaomiao said confidently. The Misty Illusory Manor has existed for tens of thousands of years. Since when has any natural disaster caused it to be sealed off? How could there be such a thing? If it's done by someone, then we can still figure out a way to try again. Jun Moxie sighed helplessly. We can only try our luck. No matter how stringent a lockdown caused by someone is, there will definitely be a flaw somewhere. We can only try our luck and see if there's any door that isn't sealed completely shut. But there are no big hopes on this. Jun Moxie said. If it's caused by someone, then it must have been Zhang Kuang. And only something as divine as the 9 illusory quicksand would be able to cause the doors to the Misty Illusory Manor shut off completely. Zhang Kuang has always done things in a ruthless manner, so he will definitely not leave many gaps. So you shouldn't get your hopes too high. The hopeful look that had just appeared on Miao Xiaomiao's face instantly dulled. Let's just head over to Tianxiang to take a look. It's not too far from here, Jun Moxie said. But this time, we don't have to travel in such a hurry anymore. Let's enjoy the scenery as we move. If we reach north of Tianxiang and the portal cannot be opened, then it's meaningless to try and head to the other portals. We shall just wait over there. The 3 girls instantly agreed. And thus, the group of four headed over to Tianxiang. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1267. Weird Asylum Seeker. This was the road Jun Moxie and Mei Shuyan took when bringing Dongfang Wenqin back. It was this place where they encountered the supreme assassin, Chu Chihuan. Back then, it was freezing cold as snow fluttered down from the sky. But now, the autumn winds were blowing as golden leaves flew in the air. Many of the forests turned a brilliant shade of vermilion. The scenery was ethereal. On this entire journey, the four of them had many matters on their minds. But with such spectacular scenery, their moods gradually lifted. They traveled along, taking occasional breaks. Yet they still remained faster than regular people by several folds. Within a few days, they could already see Tianxiang city from afar. As Jun Moxie looked at this majestic city, he was suddenly filled with a plethora of emotions. He just watched from afar, standing still for a while. Mei Shuyan and the rest seemed to be able to sense what he was feeling, joining him for a while, standing silently. After a long while, Jun Moxie finally let out a sigh and said, "Let's enter the city and take a look at Tang Yuan. We'll just pass through." Without alerting anyone, the four of them entered Tianxiang just like that. Young Master Jun's old hometown, Tianxiang City. Although the place hadn't changed, there was a difference in their minds. The three ladies were extremely curious and interested about this hometown of the evil monarch. Miao Xiaomiao really wished to understand the hometown of her lover, while Qiaoying was developing an interest in the birthplace of the evil monarch. And though Mei Shuyan had spent some time in Tianxiang City, she had spent most of her time in the Jun residence due to all the busy matters and had never taken a good look at this Tianxiang City. Then, they moved away quickly. Now that she finally had the time, it was a good chance to take a good look around. Young Master Jun also suffered for the first time. The suffering of shopping with women. Even with Jun Moxie's tough body, after walking around with these women for an entire day of shopping, both his legs were aching. Young Master Jun was beaching incessantly internally. But this sightseeing had allowed Qiaoying to feel much more relieved from the depressing thoughts in her mind, and Miao Xiaomiao's anxiety and worries also faded away as she shopped about. Being tired out like this was worth it. Women were truly powerful when they started shopping. Even the powerful young Master Jun Moxie was completely drained while they remained unaffected. Ultimately, it was Great Beauty Mei who pitied a certain someone who was turning pale with trembling legs. She decisively convinced the other two girls to end the day's shopping. It was nighttime. The four of them discreetly made their way to the number 1 secret base of Tianxiang. Aristocratic Hall. The security of the Aristocratic Hall was top-notch across the entire continent. But the four of them were peak experts, with a Saint Emperor cultivation at minimum. This sort of top-level security was no form of hindrance whatsoever. The four of them silently slipped past the defenses set up by Hai Chinfeng and Song Shang, heading right into Tang Yuan's study room. No one discovered their presence the entire time. But it couldn't be helped. Getting ordinary experts to defend against the peak experts of the world was the equivalent of a computer noob trying to guard against a top-notch hacker. They were of completely different tiers. The four of them arrived in Tang Yuan's study and had yet to think of how they were going to enter when the aroma of meat wafted from within. On one of the shelves, there was a huge basin of unfinished meat. And it was covered by a piece of cloth. It looked like Tang Yuan intended to continue eating it. The four of them exchanged glances, feeling amused. Miao Xiaomiao and Qiaoying may not know Tang Yuan very well, while Mei Shuiyan was rather familiar with Tang Yuan. Jun Moxie didn't have many friends, he acknowledged. And Tang Yuan was one of the rare few. Thus, she naturally knew of Tang Yuan's habits. Looks like even though Tang Yuan has successfully lost weight, he still places food as his top priority. Thinking about eating anytime, anywhere. It's just that it's a little uncouth to be eating meat in the study room. Though it seemed like Tang Yuan had never bothered about being cultured. And young Master Jun was the same way. Just at this moment, footsteps suddenly rang out from the door. From the sound of it, it seemed to be two people who were heading over. Jun Moxie gave a look and the four of them quickly concealed themselves behind the shelves silently. Even a Xian cultivator may not be able to discover their presence. Tang Yuan's study was properly arranged from before. It was more like a small meeting hall. The four of them didn't find it squeezy to hide behind the large bookshelves. And the shelves were all filled up. And many were rare pieces, or even extant fragments of books. As if the owner of this place was extremely cultured and educated. But who knew if Tang Yuan had looked at any of these books? I still do not understand. Why did you come and find me for? Tang Yuan's voice rang out, a tinge of arrogance in his tone. Clearly, the person coming in with him wasn't worthy of his respect. In fact, there were really not many people in the world who were capable of making the god of fortune Tang Yuan view them as important. I had come to Lord Tang to seek asylum. I have no other intentions, please reflect upon this. The voice that rang out was unexpected. It seemed to be that of an official. He sounded stiff, but he didn't sound as passionate as Jun Moxie imagined. Jun Moxie couldn't help but feel surprised. This fellow came to Tang Yuan for help, but he is still so stiff. Just from this voice alone, it's obvious that this fellow probably was not one who was good at bootlicking. Let's see how Tang Yuan is going to handle this. You said that you want to seek shelter under me? He. Your words are rather interesting. But I wonder what is your purpose in seeking shelter under a businessman, when you are the head of the capital's yamen? I really can't figure it out. Ah! The chair squeaked nosily as Tang Yuan sat into his personal chair comfortably, swaying back and forth. Lord Tang is not someone in the government, nor the political scene. But right now, Lord Tang is the most powerful person in the entire continent. That person's voice sounded a little helpless, but there was a tinge of decisiveness too. The entire continent knows that you can offend all the rulers, but do not offend the god of fortune. Because offending the emperor means death. Perhaps one may escape with high Xian cultivation. But anyone who offends the god of wealth is destined to live a life worse than death. I'm not the only person who says this. This is a fact that everyone knows of. Jun Moxie was getting more curious. This person's voice doesn't sound like someone who was capable of being a shameless bootlicker, but someone like this, to come seeking shelter under Tang Yuan of his own accord. What's his reason for doing so? And one more thing. From Tang Yuan's words, he was also an important official of Tian Xiang's yamen. This made the entire matter more bizarre. Oh. Tang Yuan lifted an eyelid. Go on. I love hearing such comments. Say a few more. Let me feel good. Then, a certain fatty laughed. The happiest thing in this world is none other than sitting comfortably in a chair to hear someone throw flattery at you. This is the life of an immortal. Gulp. The person opposite Tang Yuan swallowed his saliva as his breathing got heavy. Clearly, he was angered by Tang Yuan's remark. This sort of enjoyable, carefree life of sitting comfortably in a chair while others throw flattery at you, when have I not wished to have it? But right now, This daddy is helping someone else experience it. You are feeling good. But I'm suffering here. With a cracking sound from the chair, Tang Yuan straightened his body as his voice turned serious. Tai Huili, I also know that you are an upright official. This is something Tianxiang City can vouch for. And you have a good reputation in Tianxiang City, especially amongst the common folks. The real reason why I entertained you personally was because you are really upright and incorruptible. Only people like this are worthy of my genuine respect. So this person was Tai Huili. This Tai Huili was one of the generals under Murong Fengyun and was a good man. Due to some reasons, he left the army and became a high-ranking official. However, as Murong Fengyun retired, he also lost his backing, falling in his government position. He ultimately landed an insignificant small official in the capital. To think that he would come seeking help from Tang Yuan. But Tang Yuan's remark of him was sincere. This person was not someone who would seek power through flattery. To do something like this today was extremely out of the blue. Tai Huili let out a long sigh, feeling more depressed after hearing Tang Yuan's praise. He remained silent, at a loss for words. Tai Huili, I admire someone like you. So I am extremely infuriated that you come seeking for me. Is it that Tianxiang no longer has any upstanding officials anymore? They all have to go through connections to become an official now. Tang Yuan questioned angrily. I am a businessman, and one who is completely unscrupulous. I only know how to earn money. You and I are on different paths. It is best that we don't cross. But why did you do this today? Lord Tang is right. You and I are on different paths. If there was any other way, why would I use such a poor method to go begging a filthy businessman that reeks of the smell of money? But today, I have to beg you, no matter what. I have to beg you, this filthy businessman that I've always found disdainful. Tai Huili's voice was filled with bitterness. Speak your reason. Tang Yuan said indifferently. I'm really disappointed that you have come to me today. If your reason is not good enough, then I will be even more disappointed in you. Then I will make you disappear from Tianxiang City completely. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1268. Vexation of Officials. Lord Tang is the god of fortune in this world, and the representative of the evil monarch in the mainland. You naturally have the qualifications to speak like this. As long as the evil monarch exists in this world, as long as Lord Jun rules this world, Lord Tang's position is unshakable. Even the emperors of the countries of this world have to treat you with respect and be careful with you, Tai Huili said bitterly. And because of this same reason, I wish to become a person under Lord Tang. What kind of reason is that? Tang Yuan's voice was filled with rage. Third young Master Jun and I were brothers from youth, and it is the same way now. From the start, it was just a friendship between the two of us. What does it have to do with outsiders like you? So what if he is now the evil monarch? Even when he was contending with the 3 holy lands, the entire continent didn't think well of his chances. I stuck by his side. I'd never cared about his status or his abilities. I only value him as a person. Jun Moxie. As a person. Even if Jun Moxie is no longer the evil monarch, even if he's a mere beggar, or a cripple, he will still be my, Tang Yuan's, brother. This is something that will never change. And this is something that has nothing to do with the politics of you officials. I will strongly reiterate one thing. I, Tang Yuan, am only a merchant. Whether it is Tianxiang City, the Xian continent, or any other place. There are no factions that belong to me. This is especially the case for courts which are filled with schemes and strife. The reputation of the evil monarch is also not something that you people can use like a tiger's skin to dr*pe over yourselves. Not only is this a taboo for the third young master, it is also a taboo for me. Tang Yuan. Tang Yuan snorted angrily. Tai Huili didn't seem to mind those words as he spoke in a calm tone. Lord Tang is already standing at the peak of the world, so you can naturally set yourself apart from the affairs of the world and be completely unrestrained like this. But countless common people are still coiled among the mortal dust. Men are helpless in acting in spite of themselves as they live in this world. As a general for half my life, I have seen the families of many brothers who died in battle, being bullied by society with no one to turn to. Abandoning a bright future in the army, I returned to Tianxiang, hoping only to do some good for those brothers and heroic soldiers who died fighting under me. Tang Yuan cocked his head and looked at him as he snorted in a ridiculing tone. It sounds touching, but your current actions are clearly one where you are putting profit before conscience, being blinded by greed, disregarding the costs. You're trying to cast your lot under a merchant's signboard. Do you still remember your original intentions? How would I not remember? I've never forgotten for even one moment. Tai Huili roared agitatedly. Ever since I returned to Tianxiang, it was old Master Murong who personally made arrangements for me. He helped with the official registrar, made me an imperial censor, and after numerous setbacks and twists, I reached the position of a circuit intendant. But after old Master Murong retired, I quickly dropped 3 ranks, finally become the senior supervising official of the capital. Compared to those high-ranking officials in the palace courts, this position of mine is not high at all. However, this position is the one I truly wished for the most. The senior supervising official of the capital is responsible for overseeing the daily affairs of the common people. It belongs to the Ministry of Justice and can be said to hold a position of power. But what I value the most about this position is that the common people can bring all their grievances to me. And among these people, many of them are the descendants of those soldiers and brothers who'd fought under me or their widows. Tai Huili laughed bitterly. Lord Tang had been born to a rich family and was clad in silk and gold from birth, enjoying delicacies every day. You would naturally not understand the difficulties of those underprivileged people who'd lost their fathers and husbands in war. But no matter how difficult life was for them, they still lived on with determination. The words, live on, may seem easy to say, but it is an extremely difficult task to do. Especially those girls who have some beauty, their looks which were supposed to be a blessing from the heavens. But it would instead become the very thing that became the tragedy for their entire family. Just because a child from the family looks pretty, it would be a reason for the family to be destroyed. Isn't this an extremely tragic and laughable joke? However, such tragedies are happening every day, constantly. The more Tai Huili spoke, the more agitated he became. Towards the end, he directly stood up and a heroic aura that had once accompanied him on the battlefield years ago once again surged from him. Tang Yuan listened quietly, not interrupting him. Ever since I took on the position of the supervising official, I've placed especially great importance on this issue. However, after I'd been in the job for a while, I finally understood that things were nowhere as simple as I'd imagined. Back then, I'd naively thought that as long as I was in that position, I would be able to fully protect the families of those brothers of mine. But who would have thought that those people whom I could protect are those who are of insignificant status? In other words, I can only protect people who others allow me to protect. If somebody in power wants to stop me from protecting them, I cannot do anything. Those who dared to do those kinds of heinous crimes are mostly rich young masters of privileged families with great power. No matter which one of these families, none of them are entities that a mere official like me can offend. If I forced things and sought my own humiliation by confronting them, those prideful bastards would instead start an even more crazy revenge. The most abominable thing is that they would not carry out their revenge against me. Instead, they would target those innocent victims whom I was trying to protect in a harsher manner. And as for me, I can only watch powerlessly. Tai Huili's voice rose with rage. Countless times, the victims of such bullying came to look for me, hoping that I could help them. I've indeed become a person with authority, but I realized that the results of me wielding my authority to help them only caused their plight to worsen. I've escalated the cases to the imperial courts countless times, and even looked for the Minister of Justice. But all my efforts were akin to dropping a pebble into an ocean, having completely no effect. Without the imperial court to back me up, my position is nothing but a false reputation. I can't even deal with the son of a mere grain merchant. In the eyes of the aristocratic families and the rich merchants, my efforts are nothing but a joke. In fact, they've already taken me as a subject of ridicule now. Some of those bastards had even begun to specially target the families of those soldiers who died in battle just to amuse themselves by looking at how I will react. These people will simply watch by the side with some wine in their hands as they observe how I run into walls at every corner. Tai Huili beat his chest with grief. I didn't lay a hand on the commoners, but the commoners are dying because of me. I, Tai Huili, am a person who doesn't know my limits and am seeking my own humiliation. I'm just an object of amusement to them, and that is fine. Some humans are born to be played with by other people. We're either played by ourselves, or played by our superiors, or even the world. However, what does this have to do with the innocent families of those brothers of mine? He grew increasingly agitated as he spoke. Those soldiers and brothers had shed their blood and sweat for years to protect their home and country. When they were killed in battle, the country only gave a mere 50 silvers to their families. Their widowed wives and children were then bullied and humiliated by the very people whom they died to protect. Even if they tried to quietly endure the sufferings and suppression, it was completely no use. Those bastards are only content when they see these destitute people bow and bend under the oppression, scraping under their feet for mercy to the point of sending their daughters to their doorsteps. Those who refused to bend and accept this hand that fate had ruthlessly dealt to them eventually all disappeared soundlessly from this world. God? Is there such a thing as God in this world? Could it be that the aristocrats of Tianxiang are really all so inhumane? Don't they know any gratitude? Tai Huili's voice broke and grew hoarse. Tang Yuan was also completely speechless. To think that a simple question from him would actually uncover such a serious matter. Lord Tang, you'd once lived the life of a debauchee as well and visited your fair share of brothels. Tai Huili's breathing grew rough as he lamented bitterly. But do you know how many of those girls that hundreds and thousands of men abused in those brothels that you'd once visited were daughters of men who'd bled and died to protect Tianxiang? How many of them were girls that had been sold to the brothels after the aristocrats had their fill of fun with them? Many of those girls had come from good families. They were the daughters of loyal subjects, knowing nothing but purity and innocence. They were precious daughters who were doted on and loved by their fathers. Tai Huili panted from the effort to voice the tragic emotions in his heart. Looking firmly at Tang Yuan, he roared. God of fortune, Tang Yuan. You are lofty and exalted, setting yourself apart from the affairs of the world. But are you able to hear the aggrieved souls of those soldiers in the underworld crying so loudly? I can hear them. Tai Huili hammered his chest again. Every night when I lie on my pillow, I will dream of my departed brothers, begging me to take care of their family. But I can't do it. I am helpless to do it. I have sinned. I have sinned. Ah! Tang Yuan drew in a breath of air, his lips trembling with shock. Standing up, he said, Lord Tai, this Tang had been disrespectful with my words just now. Please, sit. Sit down, and let's talk slowly. Jun Moxie listened from the side, his face as sullen as a stale pool of water. Killing intent leaked from his body. Those things that Tai Huili had said were undoubtedly the cold, hard truth. The top families of Tianxiang who wielded the highest authority perhaps would not stoop so low to do these kinds of things. However, some of those middle-ranking families indeed had this kind of perverse pastime. In the last several hundred years of Tianxiang's history, the various influential families in the country had formed extremely wide connections. Even if a single small family was provoked, if the matter was not handled cleanly, all their backings would quickly come forward to retaliate. As long as the offended party was not snuffed out quickly enough with a single stroke, they would have countless opportunities to strike back. This heavenly web of connections was completely airtight. However, how could there be heavenly webs in the mortal world? As time passed, this web had become harder and harder to unravel, and the connections between the aristocrats grew ever more intricate. At the same time, their actions became more and more lawless, resulting in the lives of the commoners becoming harder and harder to the point where many people would not be able to continue living. In the end, the country would also devolve into a criminal state. Tai Huili sat down, his emotions still incredibly agitated. He'd already completely forgotten about the matter that he'd come to ask from Tang Yuan and had instead completely vented his emotions. His eyes red and bloodshot, he sighed. Just like this, the people of the capital even began to hail me as a just and incorruptible official who's willing to serve the people. But in actuality, I'm just a useless person who cannot do anything for them. However, the people still become increasingly reliant on me, and my reputation as an official actually became better. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1269. Tyrannic Backscene. But who is there to know that every time someone praises me like this, my face would burn with so much shame. I would wish for nothing more than to take a rope and hang myself. What is the use of having an honest judge like me? I clearly cannot do anything, and I cannot even protect the families of brothers and have to watch by the side as they get humiliated repeatedly. Apart from drinking myself unconscious every night, what else can I do? Tai Huili sat on the chair, his arms hanging helplessly by his side. Slowly, he raised his hands and covered his face. All of a sudden, tears poured endlessly from his eyes, and he howled painfully. Just like that, an iron-blooded warrior like Tai Huili began to cry. I can understand your feelings. But you come to me to say that you want to subordinate yourself to me. How is that useful to this matter? Or perhaps, you want me to help you in other ways? In that case, you can go ahead and name it. Tang Yuan clapped his hand and Hai Chenfeng, who had been guarding the door outside, came in. Tang Yuan nodded at him, and Hai Chenfeng quickly left. I just want to be your subordinate. That is all. Tai Huili said bitterly. Lord Tang, perhaps you don't know what it means to be a person under you. This request of mine today is not something that was asked on a whim. It's something that I'd considered for a long time. In these few years, I'd come to understand a certain fact. Even if one has a genuine heart to help the commoners, it's still impossible if one doesn't have any strong backing. Tai Huili laughed bitterly and shook his head. I've also found out that the so-called just judge is something that is impossibly difficult to be. They are restricted at every turn because they don't have any solid backing to depend upon. I need a strong backing. And you are that strong backing. A powerful backing that no one can or would dare to shake. Tai Huili bit his lips until they bled as he continued. That is the reason I've come to look for you today. Tang Yuan stood up and paced a few steps in the room, not saying anything. Although he knew that what Tai Huili had said was the truth, he still sent Hai Chenfeng to investigate the situation. Right now, he was considering whether he should agree to Tai Huili's request. Once he gave his support, it would mean that he would be entering a complex political world. That would undoubtedly create a huge stir in the world. What he would face was a battle of principles, and a nearly endless number of enemies. Although Tang Yuan didn't care about this level of trouble, and even without borrowing Jun Moxie's influence, just his abilities as the god of fortune was enough to handle anything that could happen, Tang Yuan also needed to keep in mind something. If he agreed to this matter, it would mean that he was stating his opinion in the affairs of the secular world. While it may purely be his own stand on the matter, some people would take it to also be the stance of his brother Jun Moxie. Such an implication was a little. Tai Huili's eyes followed Tang Yuan's steps closely, and his expression grew more and more solemn. Apart from me, who else have you approached about this matter? Tang Yuan asked. In the entire country, there are only 2 people who have enough power to do this. One of them is naturally you, and the other is Lord Li Yuran. Tai Huili answered honestly. Before I looked for you, I considered that since you were not someone involved in the government, your position is more unique. So I visited Lord Li first. What did Li Yuran say? Tang Yuan asked with a deep voice. Lord Li said that in the entire Tianxiang, or rather, in the whole of the Xian continent, the only person who has enough power and influence to this and truly give me the support I need is you. The god of fortune, Tang Yuan. Tai Huili laughed and said with a bitter smile. Lord Li said at that time. I agree with what you are trying to do, and if it were me, I can help you too. But there is a possibility of an unforeseen consequence in every matter. If something big happens, someone definitely needs to come and clean the situation up. My position is a little too sensitive since my influence as the Prime Minister is too much. I'll put it in another way for you. If I create too large a storm, the evil monarch may not bail me out. But if it were Tang Yuan instead, even if that fatty poked a hole in the sky, the evil monarch would cover that hole up for him. After saying this, he paused for a moment and looked up. Truthfully, you don't need to do anything in this matter. You don't even need to say anything. As long as you acknowledge this cooperation between us, I will be able to go all out and serve the common people, without anyone daring to obstruct me. All the problems will be resolved. Simple as that. For this reason, Lord Li told me to look for you. Feck his granny. Is this daddy the kind of person who cannot solve my own problems? Tang Yuan suddenly flew into a rage. Li Yuran. That bastard. He'd been playing the fox since he was 5 years old. Is he planning to be a schemer until the day he dies? Although he was cursing vehemently in his mouth, Tang Yuan still knew that what Li Yuran had said was the truth. No matter what kind of waves he wanted to create in this world, Tang Yuan would not have anything to fear. The fatty's connections now might be considerably powerful. But the main reason he was powerful was because he had Jun Moxie as his backing. As long as he had the ability, even if he managed to truly pierce a hole through the sky, Jun Moxie would definitely not stand by the side and would come to bail him out. Compared to him, Li Yuan's position was vastly different. His relationship with Jun Moxie was far from the fatty's level to the point of being completely incomparable. That was what Lord Li said. Those were his exact words. Tai Huili sighed, having finally finished all he'd come to say. This is a hornet's nest we're talking about, although I do have the power to go and poke that nest. It is still troublesome, very troublesome. Tang Yuan rubbed his temples with annoyance. Behind the shelf, Mei Xueyan looked at Jun Moxie, her eyes full of a questioning look. She was clearly curious as to why Jun Moxie was not going out. Jun Moxie raised his brows slightly, but he did not say anything. Right now, young Master Jun was intending to watch to see how Fatty Tang was going to deal with this matter. With the fatty's personality, Jun Moxie was quite certain that his decision would not be far from what he expected. This fellow was undoubtedly a classic fearless dude. As long as Hai Chenfeng's investigation showed that Tai Huili had been telling the truth, Jun Moxie could predict that Tang Yuan would definitely give his full support. Money could make the devil work, and move even the gods. If the god of fortune was willing to give his support, then even without young Master Jun's assistance, he would definitely be able to complete this matter, no matter how troublesome it is. Since even Li Yuran said those words, it means that he also supports this matter. Tang Yuan furrowed his brows and said, I trust that as long as I give my support, Li Yuran would definitely also give his assistance behind the scenes. At the appropriate time, he would begin a grand cleansing of the city. At the same time, doing this would also accomplish a certain objective of his. Li Yuran is using me as his knife. The good reputation and all the benefits will end up going to him, that dastardly thing. As he said that, Tang Yuan gritted his teeth hatefully. Feck. The next time he's drunk, this daddy will definitely settle him with a knife. He thinks that he's the only fellow with a good brain in this world. When Tang Yuan said those words, Jun Moxie, who was hiding behind the bookshelf, could not help but to widen his eyes with shock. Feck. When did this fatty's brain become so good? This kind of wit and this kind of logical thinking doesn't seem like something that Tang Yuan can do. What Tang Yuan said was right. Since Li Yuran had already stated his attitude, he definitely had some actions to follow up with that. As long as Tang Yuan made his move, Li Yuran would immediately make his move as well. He would borrow the name of the god of fortune and the evil monarch to proceed with some plans that he'd always been hesitant to do. The words "make use of" seemed somewhat heavy, but borrowing was the most commonly used method of Li Yuran. And this situation was something that he definitely had to borrow. A whooshing sound rang out, and Hai Chenfeng arrived smoothly. Looking at Tang Yuan, he nodded. This nod meant that everything that Tai Huili had said was the truth. Ha! Tang Yuan slammed a fist onto the table, and his eyes grew dangerous. Tai Huili looked at him in a stupefied manner, unsure what this big boss was suddenly going crazy about. He was clearly still perfectly fine a moment ago. But what he didn't know was that if Tang Yuan hadn't displayed this anger, the unfortunate one would be him. Tang Yuan gritted his teeth and looked at him. Tai Huili, tell me honestly. How determined are you about this matter? Tai Huili's face instantly lit up with joy. As long as Lord Tang is willing to support me, I will definitely see this matter to the end. Even if I die and go to hell doing it, there will be no regrets. Good. Tang Yuan smacked his palm on the table and nodded heavily. Then, you have my support on this matter. We're doing this. This fellow was speaking like a gangster. Although he was about to embark on an important matter that would affect the entire country, He announced it in a way as if he had decided to lead his band of bandits to rob a rich convoy. Tai Huili was so choked with joy that he nearly fainted. However, his eyes were shining with a gleam so bright that it could cut. He knew full well what those words from Tang Yuan's mouth meant. That single sentence meant the dropping of countless heads in Tianxiang. Right now, apart from the evil Monarch Manor, Duanmu family, Silver City, Xikong family, and a few other large families that were still intact after the war, Tang Yuan held the most influence in the entire continent. In every way, he was a person that had as much money and manpower as he needed. Ever since Jun Moxie left the capital, all the underground triad forces also ended up in Tang Yuan's hands. Right now, the aristocratic hall truly had great influence in both the lawful and unlawful factions of the city. They had the absolute power to sweep through the capital. It was a mercy that Tang Yuan didn't have any ambitions towards governance. Song Shang and Hai Chenfeng also ensured that their power was completely safeguarded. There were no conflicts with the imperial family, and it would instead serve as the sharpest weapon in Tianxiang. This kind of strange situation could also be considered unprecedented in history. Tomorrow, I will officially give the word to Li Yuran that you, Tai Huili, are a subordinate of mine. Go ahead and perform your duties. There's no need to care about anyone at all. Tang Yuan instructed decisively. Even if your investigation leads you to Li Yuran's Li family, go ahead and prosecute them. You have me to back you up. From now on, you no longer need to fear anyone. If anything happens, you can just let me know. Tang Yuan snorted. Qing Feng. Ah. A figure flashed, and Hai Chenfeng appeared in the room. Go and tell Song Shang and tell him to choose some elite men. They will be following Lord Tai in his business. That fellow only knows how to hug his wine jugs all day long. It's time for him to go out and stretch his old bones. Otherwise, he'll become as fat as I was in the past. Tang Yuan sniggered. Also, let the our connections in the city know. Regardless if they are lawful or unlawful forces, that they must support Lord Tai in all his business. If there are any obstructions, sweep them aside. There's no need to fear anyone. Anyone that blocks us, no matter who they may be, can be killed with no mercy. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1270. Severe and serious. I understand. Or, why don't we let that fellow Song Shang be in charge of protecting you instead, and I will follow this guy to handle this matter? I'm afraid that drunkard will end up creating more troubles after drinking too much, Hai Chenfeng proposed tentatively. Mainly, he just felt extremely suffocated staying beside this fatty all day long. How was it more exciting than going out and stirring up the world? That won't do. Tang Yuan rejected it directly. The more someone doesn't want to follow me, the more I want to make that person follow me. That person should just give up on the thought of leaving me. He chuckled twice and smiled. Third young master specifically instructed before that you are to be my personal bodyguard. Hai Chenfeng wrung his hands helplessly, completely losing all hope. How did this fatty become more and more clever? Go. Tai Huili, do whatever you need to do. Tang Yuan raised his hand arrogantly. As long as this daddy is still in Tianxiang, those young feckers can go and feck themselves. Tai Huili beamed with joy and thanked him repeatedly as he was led away by Hai Chenfeng. Before he left, Tang Yuan still shouted after him. Since you're going to make a move, you need to do something big. All the old and new debts shall be accounted for together. No family will be let off, not even if it's Li Yuan's Li family. Investigate ruthlessly. How can there not be a price to pay for making use of this daddy? When Tai Huili left, his forehead was filled with cold sweat. This god of fortune was truly somewhat petty. Tang Yuan sat alone in the study room and chuckled in a silly manner as he mumbled to himself. Li Yuan, you sneaky scheming bastard. You won't let this daddy stay away. So this daddy will also not let you have a good time. At this time, another voice rang out. How are you not having a good time like this? You're helping him out a great deal. AI, you donghua fatty. This young master still thought that you'd become smarter. But from the looks of it, you're still as irredeemably dumb as before. When he heard this voice, Tang Yuan jumped up with shock and shouted joyfully. Third young master. You're really back. Behind him, a white-robed young man stood. If it was not Jun Moxie, who could it be? But Tang Yuan's happiness only lasted for a few seconds when his smile froze into a dumbfounded expression as he stared at the three peerless beauties beside Jun Moxie. A line of crystalline-looking drool rolled out from his mouth, dripping onto the ground. After a long time, he sighed. Feck. To think that there are actually such beauties in the world. And they're actually my good brother's wife. Jun Moxie punched him in the stomach and scolded him laughingly. Are these wives of this young master people whom you can ogle at? Be careful not to have your fat torn off your body by them. If they really want to do something, this young master is also helpless to save you. What nonsense, how is there any fat on my body now? Tang Yuan rolled his eyes and said. Right. Third young master. What did you say just now? About me not being clever. You still don't admit it? Don't you know that dealing with those useless young masters of the Li family is exactly the thing that Li Yuan wants you to do the most? Jun Moxie laughed. You really think that Li Yuan isn't interested in getting rid of those disgraceful members of his family? He's also just not too enthusiastic about doing that kind of thing himself, given that he's also part of the family. Now, you'd helped him out so much. I dare to guarantee that if you take care of those bastards for him, he will treat you to a drink on the same night and drink until you both are drunk. Tang Yuan was stupefied. Feck. How did I fall for the scheme of that bastard? Why not just let a few of them go, let them off? Would your conscience be able to take that? Jun Moxie raised his eyebrows. What's the point of keeping that kind of people? You might as well weed them out together. Take it as you doing a large favor for Li Yuan. Order the most expensive drink on that day and bankrupt him. Tang Yuan nodded repeatedly as he heard young Master Jun's advice. Also, about the matter that Tai Huili brought up, it's an important issue that will affect future generations. You need to take it seriously. Do not treat it as a small matter. If anyone asks, just tell them that all this is done under my instruction, Jun Moxie said with a calm expression. There's no need to worry about bringing me trouble. Those scum should have been eradicated long ago. There's no need to worry about matters that we don't know about. But since we know about it now, we have a duty to rid the world of those evils. Don't be soft-hearted. And don't be merciful. That's great. Tang Yuan clapped his hands happily. The so-called ridding the world of evil was something that would definitely involve the interests of the rich and influential relatives of royalty. Once those people were involved, it would definitely bring up the attention of the royal family. If the Emperor Yang Huinong and the Crown Prince Yang Mo came to plead with him, Tang Yuan still needed to give them some face. After all, the pride of the royal family could not be trampled upon so blatantly. And for people he knew personally, it was even harder to not give them some leeway. But Tang Yuan and Jun Moxie were the same kind of people. Either they didn't do something, or they would do it cleanly and see it through to the end. Failing to see a matter through completely would be like having a fishbone stuck in their throats. And so, Tang Yuan's only concern had only been this. Now, with a single word from Jun Moxie, the most headache-inducing problem was solved. At that time, if the emperor asked him, he only needed to shrug his shoulders and smile. I'm helpless about this as well. It was Jun Moxie who asked me to do it. Why not go and look for Jun Moxie and discuss it with him? It's guaranteed that anyone who came to ask him would not dare to let out a single fart anymore. Those who still remained stubborn would simply be looking for their own death. Would anyone in the entire continent dare to block something that the evil monarch wanted to do? Those who tried were definitely too tired of living. Before the news of such a person reached Jun Moxie's ears, that person would have already been killed by people who wanted to suck up to Jun Moxie. This was precisely the meaning of, if I don't make a sound upon the dawn of spring, which insect dares to chirp first? Jun Moxie and the girls remained in Tianxiang City for 3 days. In these 3 days, the entire Tianxiang City was completely turned over. When Li Yuran received the message by Tang Yuan, he almost couldn't believe that such a coincidental thing could happen in this world. Jun Moxie just so happened to be here and had even specially made a trip for this matter. Following that, he immediately hurried into the palace to report to the Emperor Yang Huainong. Following that, numerous exceedingly strict royal decrees were released. Not just Tianxiang City, but the entire country of Tianxiang was swept into a storm. Especially for the incident a few days ago where 2 aristocrats' carriages collided in the streets and harmed several commoners. Tang Yuan directly stirred the matter up and used those aristocrats as an example. Under everyone's eyes, the offenders were stripped naked and hung outside the city. As for those accomplices who committed evil deeds using the names of others, they were directly abandoned. Like what Jun Moxie said. Feck their grannies. Fatty Tang directly copied his words and eliminated their 9 generations. In just these 3 days, nearly 10,000 heads dropped. And this campaign was still continuing, growing ever more intense. Those aristocrats who enjoyed bullying the commoners, those corrupt high-level officials and large families who completely disregarded the lives of commoners, they were all down on their luck. When they were bullying the commoners for their own amusement or abusing their power and wealth, they probably would have never thought that their actions would actually directly lead to the destruction of their family line. Who said that there was no justice in the world? Jun Moxie once said at the execution grounds where heads were being lobbed off everywhere. Good begets good, and evil is repaid with evil. It's not that the consequences are not being dealt. It's just that the time had not come. But now that I'm here, the time has also come. Evil spirits, demons, and monsters, execute them all. The entire process could be said to be unexpectedly smooth, no matter who came to beg for mercy. They were labeled as accomplices by Tang Yuan and doubly investigated instead. Truthfully, all these officials would more or less have some shut stains on their B*TT. No one was completely clean. If they were really investigated seriously, all of them would be heading for the gallows. Looking at the number of officials being led out in ropes and chains, even Tang Yuan was shocked. This god of fortune mumbled to himself. Feck. I just realized something. If all the officials in Tianxiang from county level onwards were lined up and sent blindfolded to the execution grounds, there would probably only be a small handful of innocent ones out of 10,000 people killed. But if we killed them one by one, there would be a small half of them slipping out of the net. Jun Moxie also felt deeply agreeable to this sentence. In response, he instructed the enforcement officers to be even stricter and more rigid. Just when Tian Xiang was being flipped upside down, Jun Moxie, Mei Xuan, and the others bade their farewell to Tang Yuan and came out. When they left, the fatty's eyes were filled with tears, and he actually nearly cried. In a few breaths of time, Jun Moxie and the rest came to the Lover's Mound. Looking at the huge stone plague, Jun Moxie sighed heavily. He seemed to have returned to that night where snow fell from the sky like flowers. Murong Xiuxiu's death, and Yi Guhan following after her. I shall give up on the heavens, but not on my beloved. Jun Moxie mumbled softly. Yi Guhan, Murong Xiuxiu, may you husband and wife pair, have true peace. May you be together now in the Yellow Springs. Ling Meng is doing very well in the evil monarch manor, so you can set your minds at ease. The pine and cypress trees swayed lightly in the wind, emitting soft rustling sounds. Jun Moxie bent his back and bowed deeply. This bow was for Yi Guhan and also for Murong Xiuxiu. Yi Guhan may not have had a particularly high cultivation, but his dedicated love was enough to move even the heavens. Just that kind of love that he displayed was enough to deserve a bow from anyone in this world. There were people coming all the time to the Lover's Mound, and the people who came to pay their respects were also many. This place had already become one of the major landmarks of Tianxiang City. Because this Lover's Mound had been personally erected by the evil monarch, and it was created in the span of a single night. This was undoubtedly a miracle. Many people constantly stole glances at the group of 3 girls and 1 man. Their bearings were simply too outstanding, and they didn't seem like normal mortals. Just their lofty auras were enough to prevent others from having nefarious thoughts against them. There were some that felt that Jun Moxie looked somewhat familiar. However, they didn't dare to go up and talk to him. They could only furrow their brows tightly and look at him secretly. Because this person and the person that they were thinking of. It was until a long time after Jun Moxie left that someone suddenly screamed. Evil monarch. That young man just now was the evil monarch, Jun Moxie. In an instant, the crowd erupted with noise. Everyone was filled with shock. To think that the publicly acknowledged #1 character of the world had actually come to Tianxiang City and had been standing right in front of their eyes. The news that the evil monarch had appeared in Tianxiang was quickly spread out. And in light of this news, the grand cleansing of the city also grew fiercer by several degrees. This story will be continued to chapter 1271. For those of you who are not subscribed yet, please subscribe. The interesting and best stories will be updated. See you again in the next episode.